So we're what, 60 some days into the Trump regime? He's already torn apart 80 plus years of alliances with European allies. He sold the people of Ukraine out in the most shameful fashion. He signed the Americans up to the new axis of evil with the dictatorships of Korea and Vladimir Putin's Russia. He's taken a chainsaw to American democratic institutions, and he's made it clear that his number one enemy in the world right now is his next door neighbor, the people of Canada. So how serious is this threat? I want to talk about the threat and the steps we need to take as Canadians to take him on. I read a really interesting article the other day in the Calgary Herald by columnist Don Braid. Now, full disclosure, I don't usually spend much time reading Don Braid. He's always bringing out the pom-poms for MAGA Premier Danielle Smith or accusing the rest of the country of not being nice enough to the big oil giants. But he did an analysis of what would happen if the American army invaded our nation. He interviewed Dr. Aisha Ahmad, an expert in counterinsurgencies and civil wars. She knows what she's talking about. And the findings are really, really important. She says that Canada's much smaller military, which is actually very well trained, would pull back and would form a guerrilla insurgency with the population of Canada. And she was very convinced that there would be enough people in that counterinsurgency to cause major problems. Added to this, of course, the willingness of First Nation people to defend their territories from foreign invasion. And her analysis at the end of the day is that America's invasion of Canada would result in the disintegration of the United States, not Canada, the disintegration of the United States, both economically and politically, because they just couldn't pull it off. Now, if someone said that about 3 months ago about invading Canada and all this stuff, that would be in some Substack, Reddit forum of conspiracy writers. But this was in a national Canadian newspaper. I was thinking of just this past week of the connections of what's happening in the United States. Democratic Representative Seth Magaziner has introduced legislation to stop Donald Trump from getting the funds he needs to invade Canada, as well as funds to stop him from invading Panama or Greenland. This is very serious stuff. And if we want to know just how serious it is, think of the Prime Minister's recent public statements after a meeting with Donald Trump. Prime Minister Trudeau came out of that and he said, the excuse that he's giving for these tariffs today of fentanyl is completely bogus, completely unjustified, completely false. What he wants to see is a total collapse of the Canadian economy because that will make it easier for him to annex us. Now, prime ministers, and I'm not a prime minister and never will be, but they usually keep the game face on. It's about being diplomatic. They never reveal, especially when a meeting has gone off the rails. But the prime minister felt it important to tell Canadians exactly what was on the table, which was Donald Trump ripping up treaties. Donald Trump told the prime minister he didn't feel bound by any of the treaties and the rules of law that govern the relations between nations, like the 1908 Border Treaty, like the Treaty on the Great Lakes that separates the United States section from the Canadian section, like our involvement in the Five Eyes intelligence network, which he wants to kick us out of. And I think that might be because it was the Five Eyes that exposed Russian support for his election campaigns. And he wants to kick us out of NORAD. NORAD is one of the most enduring defense systems in the history of the last century, and it protects the far north, Canada particularly, and the United States from Russia. Well, you can know why he's wanting to kick Canada out. Okay, so what do we do with this? Because if you have a president who no longer believes he's bound by the rule of law, it becomes a gangster state, like Vladimir Putin's Russia, but also like the failed states in Somalia and other places where gangster regimes took over. When you're dealing with that as your next door neighbor, you have to get very, very serious. Now, I don't want people thinking too much about, these scenarios of us sneaking out in the dark with our balaclavas on to fight the Yankee invader. What we need to do is stay focused on the incredible power that we have, because Donald Trump thought we would just roll over, and we didn't. Right now, you don't see the opposition to Donald Trump coming from the Democrats. You don't see it coming from the U.S. justice system or the courts. It is coming from Canada. The world is watching Canada's resistance now. We are the frontline opposition to Donald Trump, which is why he's so furious at us and why he keeps backing down and why he keeps changing the story. But we can't lose any sleep over whatever Donald Trump's going to do. We need to stay firm and focused on the fight ahead, because it is an existential fight for us, but it's also a fight for democracy. This is why the rest of the world's watching. So I want to tell people to keep the boycott going. You have been incredible. You have been out in front on this, not the political leaders. You have. We need to keep the pressure on our political leaders to maintain a strong position. Like Premier David Eby, who's threatening to cut off critical minerals to the United States. Like Premier Ford, a guy I've never gotten along with, who's willing to cut the electricity and also nickel supplies. We got to get Daniel Smith and Premier Moe off the MAGA truck and get them defending their provinces, because they can't be selling their agricultural communities, they can't be selling their high tech, they can't be selling their manufacturing sectors down the river to please Donald Trump. It is going to be all of Team Canada approach, and I think that that's where we're going right now. And the other thing I think is really important is we have to start building the resistance at the local level. What do I mean by that? Well, I think we need to start building local chapters of Canadian resistance. You guys are out there doing the work. You're out there making sure that your families aren't buying American, that you canceled your trips. But we need to start building grassroots networks of people who are there for each other, because we are the front line in the fight for democracy. It is us in North America, and it is Ukraine in Europe. And we see how Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are trying to destroy Ukraine. We're the second line of defense. So I just want to thank everyone and say stay strong, elbows up. We're going to stand the gaff. We're going to outlive this guy. And at the end of the day, it may be a hard fight. It may be a long fight. But Canada will come out with our head held high, because we will never kiss the gangster's ring. Never, never, never. True North, strong and free.